All right. I'm also in student affairs. I'm the assistant director of our Multicultural Student Center at University of Wisconsin in Madison. And so a lot of you I know are coming from different campuses. So you know how we are all kind of trying to figure out what we can do with this semester. How do we recognize our graduates, things like that. And then of course, other parts of life. So when we were kind of organizing our lives, that's where it was like, hey, Ramadan is coming up, and it kind of really just creeped up on us. It's going to be starting next week. So we were like, hey, we should probably do this. We'd held a webinar similar to this last year, but with all the Corona and COVID-19 stay-at-home orders, things like that, Ramadan may be looking differently for a lot of people who practice. So we'll be getting into that a little bit as well. At any time, again, if you can't hear anything, just put it in the chat, or you can message me directly, and try to stay on mute. Thank you. So our goals for today are just sharing general information about Ramadan. What is it? How is it practiced? And then also how you can support your Muslim students, your community, your neighbors, whoever you may be interacting with at this time. And really, the first thing that we want to say is like, you just being here is a great step to that. Being able to recognize that this is a major part for a lot of practicing Muslims, and knowing more will help you just be there for support or celebrating or just having conversation. And number two, what we do ask is ask questions. This is the space to ask that. No question is stupid, or you should know that. Working in multicultural affairs, sometimes we have this aura of like, we should be knowing everything about every community, and that's not fair. So I applaud you all for coming here to learn more. And so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And if you're joining via phone, you can always send an email to the bookamuslim@gmail.com, and we'll include that in this conversation. And some personal disclaimers: we may not have the answers to all the questions, but we will work hard to find the resources for you to help you get that answer. And we'll continue this conversation even offline if we need to. The other disclaimer is I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, so they may want to join here anytime. So sorry ahead of time, but that just happens. And if that happens with you and your kids are there, or your pets are there, whatever, that's all good too. So we have 2 guests with us here today. I'm going to introduce them, and then we'll get more into the meat of this. So Faizan Mumtaz and Farhan Saeed are here with us. Faizan has been working as a mentor for Muslim youth since the age of 14 through Young Muslims, where he served with various leadership positions at the local and national level. He studied classical Arabic at the Fajr Institute in Cairo, and has taught Quranic Arabic at numerous Islamic centers and Islamic schools, including Islamic Learning Foundation, Bayana Institute, and Universal School in Bridgeview, Illinois. He recently earned his Master's of Education and currently works as an instructional designer at American Intercontinental University. And Farhan is a PhD student in Language Equity and Educational Policy at Oregon State University, holds a Master's of Arts in Higher Education Administration from Louisiana State University College of Education. His research interests currently focus on Muslim identity development and how Muslim students navigate and construct their religious identity on university and college campuses. Presently, he sits on the NASPA leadership team for the Spirituality and Religion Knowledge Community, and serves on the board of directors of Convergence, a national organization focused on enhancing institutional climates for religious, secular, and spiritual identities through policy and practice. Prior to returning to graduate school to pursue his doctorate, he worked for several years at Madison House, a student volunteer center at the University of Virginia, as the director of community engagement. Additionally, he has experience in doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, higher education assessment, and developing a social justice curriculum. All right, well, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so first, just can you tell us how you're doing, with everything that's going on, and as you think about and prepare for Ramadan?
Sure, I can start. So I currently reside in Naperville, Illinois. So I'm here in the Midwest. Since I work for an online university, the transition to working from home hasn't been that difficult. A lot of our infrastructure is already online. So from a work perspective, I'm just happy and grateful to be employed during this pandemic. I also have 2 young children, ages 2 and 6. They just left to go to my in-laws' house, so I hopefully won't have anybody barging in, hopefully. So I have the same challenge that a lot of people are facing. Being a full-time parent, full-time teacher almost with kids, full-time employee means wearing a lot of different hats all at the same time. And actually, I don't own a hat, unfortunately, which I could use right now because there's no barbers that are open. But as I mentioned, I am lucky that my in-laws live right down the street. And so, and they're amazing in-laws. And so I'm just happy we have that support system. And so just trying to make the best of this stay-at-home situation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Farhan. I use he, him, his pronouns. So currently I'm living in Corvallis, Oregon, here on the Pacific Northwest. I actually moved here last September from Virginia. So a really big cultural shock moving from the East Coast to the West Coast. So currently I'm a graduate assistant in the Diversity and Cultural Engagement Office, and we've kind of transitioned everything online. I am an extrovert, so I am been really struggling with kind of the situation that we've been in. You know, it's been hard for me to put it, being very honest with you. I'm away from my family. My family is in Tennessee, and there isn't a lot of community right now. So I think that has been really challenging for me. So having a support system, you know, here in the town of Corvallis has been very difficult. So I've been trying to really supplement that with, you know, FaceTiming with my family and connecting with my friends back home. And yeah, I'm super excited to share what my experiences have been with you all. And yeah, that's just me.
Awesome. Thank you. So first, we'll get into the nuances of Ramadan. So we're hosting this webinar to help folks understand what is Ramadan, and most people may have heard of it. If not, we'll kind of start from the very basics, and then we will move on from there. So Faizan, if you can kind of go through the who, what, where, when of Ramadan, kind of based in the Quran and Sunnah, the traditions that we get our Islamic knowledge from.
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So as you mentioned, just right now, there's two authentic sources of knowledge in our religion that we utilize to understand how we practice it, understand its teachings to a deeper level. One is the Quran, which we believe to be the final revelation from God to the last and final messenger, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So that's one authentic source that we're going to be using, and everything that I'm going to be talking about today is going to be rooted either in that or the other entity, which we call the Sunnah, which is basically the culmination of all the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that can be authentically traced back to him through different narrations. So in light of those two sources, the first kind of introduction to the Quran that even Muslims get, introduction to Ramadan that Muslims get is from the Quran. So in the Quran, in the second chapter, there's a verse that that God tells us, Shahru Ramadan, the month of Ramadan, alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran, in which the Quran was revealed. So one of the reasons that Ramadan is so special is because this final revelation, which was revealed over in like pieces over 23 years, began its revelation in the month of the Quran. And this is a month that that in the verse it says hudan lin nasi, it's guidance for people, wa bayyinat, and clear proofs, wa min al huda wal furqan, and it's a opportunity to know what is right and what is wrong. And so whoever is present during that month, faman shahida minkum ash-shahr falyasumhu, then they should fast during that month. And then the verse goes on to say whoever is sick or whoever is traveling, then they can make up those days, and there's some exemptions. And so in a nutshell, this month of Ramadan it's not just a single event that takes place in one day or one weekend. It's actually comprised of an entire month. And in the Islamic tradition, the Islamic calendar, which can also be referred to as the lunar calendar, has 12 months, just like the Gregorian calendar. And each month is 29 or 30 days. And this is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. And that means this entire event, this month of Ramadan, is going to last for 29 or 30 days. And so not only is the time span is really long, but even what happens throughout each day. So like, we know that most major religions have their own version of fasting. And so when I say fasting, if I'm talking to my coworker who's a devout Christian, they'll interpret it some way. If I talk to my boss who's a devout, who follows Judaism, she'll interpret it maybe in a different way. So to clarify what I mean when I say the word fasting in the Islamic tradition, it basically is comprised of abstaining from food and flesh. I mean, I just say that because it's easy to remember. Basically, we cannot eat, we cannot drink, and we cannot have relations with our spouses from dawn till sunset. And so here in Chicago, dawn is around like 4:45 in the morning, and sunset is around 7:20, something like that. So this month of Ramadan, basically for these 17 or so hours in Chicago, I will not be able to eat anything. I will not be able to drink anything. That includes water as well. I will not be able to have relations with my wife during this time. It's really a moment, it's really a time where we have this kind of act of worship that is something that we're doing sincerely for the sake of God because he ordered us to do it. And it's a way for us to kind of train ourselves, and a lot of the benefits of it, we're going to get into, I think, during our conversation. And so if I think of Ramadan as this month, this one unit, but even within it, there's each day has its own kind of specialty going on. So like during the day, I'm abstaining from all of these things, my whole habit, my routine of like eating and what I do during the day is completely shifted because Muslims generally are encouraged to wake up before dawn so that they can pray, but also so that they can eat and they can sustain themselves during the day. And so if I'm used to waking up at like 7 o'clock in the morning, now I'm waking up 4:30 in the morning. So my whole day is basically shifted. And so until sunset, and then everything that was not permissible during the day is now permissible after sunset. And so a lot of things that you're used to doing, like eating with your family, dinner and things like that, you're really having your first meal at night. And so it shifts things around quite a bit. So at a high level, that's what the month of Ramadan is. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, would fast every day in the month of Ramadan. He would also do additional prayers at night in the month of Ramadan. And then the entire month ends with a day called Eid, which is a celebration. It means holiday or festival. And it's this celebration that's culminating this end of this religious worship that we did during this entire month.
All right, thank you. So, Farhan, can you kind of go through what that may look like in practice?
Yeah, of course. So typically Ramadan, like kind of a day-to-day will look different for each person, but generally Muslims wake up for a pre-fast meal called sehri or sahur is what people call it in the Arabic language. And typically during that time, you're eating foods that are, sunnah that the Prophet, peace and blessings may be upon him, that had eaten there. So for me, typically, I like to keep it really light. So thinking of like dates, because it's really high in fiber, water, try to get lots of fluid in there. But foods such as like whole grain, fruits and vegetables, kind of just dried fruit, just something light. There is this like misconception a lot of times that people lose weight during Ramadan, but that's definitely not the case. People a lot of times eat a lot of like oily, fatty foods. And so I personally try to stay away from that. And then, so again, the fast for me starts around like here in Corvallis, fast will start around 5 a.m. So again, I'll be getting up around 4:30, 4 a.m. To do prayers before fast starts, and also be able to get some kind of food and water in my system. And then throughout the day, you do congregational prayers. So we pray 5 times a day. And so that is a point throughout the day that we are always remembering God. And then after your fast is open, which is called iftar, it's where it's the breaking of your fast. It's a lot of times people go to the mosque and have a community meal to build community with each other. And then right after that is you have your 5th and final prayer called Isha. But after Isha, these are additional prayers called Tarawih prayers, which you typically complete 1/30th of the Quran. So by the time all Ramadan is over, you as a congregation, as a group, have completed the Quran, one cycle of that. And a lot of times people will do congregational prayers at home with their family during this time. It's really to increase your spiritual practice, your ritual to worship God more. And for me specifically, you know, one of the traditions that my family and I did was right before the fast would be opening, we'd read Quran together, read the holy book together. That would be, you know, like we would pick a passage of it and we would recite it for each other. And, you know, if time permitted, we would also, you know, have conversations around kind of what that chapter of the Quran was meaning and how that relates to Ramadan. And that is something that my family and I did. And then we would do all this every day for 30 days. You know, typically people have these misconceptions and apologize. Like, what as like a non-Muslim should I do around my friends and neighbors and students? You know, one, it's okay to eat around us. Like, you don't have to apologize. Two, I strongly suggest just being flexible with your Muslim neighbors and students and friends, knowing that they are fasting, abstaining from several different things. To, you know, maybe not scheduling a lunch, like a lunch meeting in between. But I think, you know, typical things like that is just maybe acknowledging and just knowing that Ramadan is happening. I think is probably the main thing that, you know, at least for me, I appreciate a lot. But those are typically what the day looks like. And, you know, little things like will vary throughout the family. But again, most of the time it is to get closer to God. So you'll be praying those 5 times a day, usually a lot of times with your community.
So Farhan, is it okay if somebody says Happy Ramadan to you?
It is okay if someone says Happy Ramadan. It is perfectly fine and I welcome it.
Okay, thank you. Faizan, was there anything that you would like to add, like of what your day may look like in Ramadan? Not here, but in typical times?
No, I think in terms of a lot of the specific things that are going on with kind of being far away from community and things like that, I think it's interesting that right now, because we're all kind of social distancing, I was just reflecting on some of the things that Farhan was saying, and I was just thinking that how right now everybody is kind of like, we're all in this together in the sense that we are staying at home, we're not interacting with people, we're not doing things in the community, we're not going to restaurants, all that kind of stuff. And it's almost as if there's like a spiritual distancing that's happening in Ramadan, where not only are we at home right now, but really I'm trying to think more introspectively and thinking, okay, well, what can I do to kind of improve myself during this month of Ramadan? Because the fasting is not just abstaining from the food and having relations, but the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, also told us that a person's fast can be worthless if they break it by becoming angry, saying bad language, being extremely lazy, being very stingy. And so I was just thinking that maybe this is a good time for me to really get comfortable with myself and kind of analyze myself and say, okay, from last Ramadan to this Ramadan, this is my like 1 year metric. What are the areas, like how have I improved? Where have I gotten worse? What are things that I can do as a husband, as a parent, as a teacher, as a community member, as a citizen, as a believer? What are the areas that I can improve in? And so I'm thinking of maybe treating it like it's a new year for me starting this month. And I want to make like my new year resolutions, and I want to work on my strengths, and I want to acknowledge the accomplishments I've had, but I also want to use it kind of as like a trampoline, as a launching point to move forward in the year. So I think those some really good points that Farhan mentioned.
Awesome, thank you. So kind of got a little bit of background of where the tradition of Ramadan comes from and then how it may look. And I think part of Islam and most practices within the religion is that it is, while there is a baseline that most Muslims agree on, it can look differently for different people at different times. And what I mean, it is very personal. For example, being a woman, being a mother, there's been, Ramadan has looked different for me over the past couple of years. So this year is the first year after 2 or 3 years that I'll be fasting. I was pregnant 1 year, then I've been nursing. And so those accommodations are made for different situations where you may not have to fast because you're sick, you're taking medications, or you are nursing, or things like that. So there's different circumstances, but there also are impacts from community that may look at things differently, and they're not all like a monolith. So in different places in the world, there's like a tradition of having a drummer walking around in the streets to wake people up to have that morning meal before the fast starts. That doesn't happen here in Chicago. I don't think that would be very welcomed, waking people up at 4 a.m. But of course, in other countries, we also hear the call to prayer 5 times a day. So there's different things that happen in different parts of the world, and even in the country, right? Like if we weren't on, a stay-at-home order, I know a lot of my friends on the West Coast, like are, their iftars when they're breaking their fast, they're outside and they're having picnics and barbecue. And that doesn't happen always, in the Midwest because it could be snowing like it did yesterday. So even those things can look different as we practice. Also, like different stages of life, what we can emphasize at different times, right? As Faizan mentioned, it's a lot of self-reflection, self-development time too. And if there's any like parents in the room, that kind of gets hard to do in general. And I think I'm feeling that personally with my kids on like having them feel excited for like Ramadan coming, kind of treating Ramadan as a guest. That's part of the tradition too, where you're so excited to be able to witness Ramadan, right? Like some people may have passed away since the last Ramadan and not be able to witness this opportunity to fast and have that self-development and reflection. So you're excited, you have these opportunities to practice and in fasting and just be with closer to God consciousness. So part of that welcoming also comes into the pomp and glitter where you're like decorating the house and you want it to be clean, so you're not wasting your time cleaning when you're fasting and get tired. So a lot of those things are things I'm trying to balance now, where I never really did when, my mom was doing all that for me, or, I was in college and I was more so struggling with, hey, I'm fasting and it's welcome week on campus. Do I even fast, or is it okay to like not fast today and have this free food that's being, offered to me because I'm a freshman. So different struggles at different ages and stages as well. And a lot of that is just life. And so I think if you all want to share some like personal like goals, Faizan, you kind of hit on that, but Fran, if you want to share some goals that you're setting for yourself this year.
Yeah, I think for me, some of the goals that I'm setting for this year, and typically what I do is, one, I try to read the Quran after each prayer. So we pray 5 times a day. So a lot of the times we get so busy with our lives and school and work and stuff like that. But I think for me, and on top of just praying, I want to also read Quran for a set amount of time. And so that is a goal that I have during Ramadan. So like after each prayer, set aside 20, 30 minutes to just read Quran. 2, another thing that a goal for mine is I do want to listen to some more Islamic lectures, specifically topics that are related to, Ramadan, things that are interesting to me. Because again, I think that's really important to build that community as well. And then typically I would normally go as a goal to go to the mosque every night and be with my community. So figuring out a way to do that online. So those are 3 kind of the goals that I have to really build community. And just to always remember that being God conscious throughout the day. And again, similar to what Faizan saying is like making sure not just to, abstain from like food and drink, but also abstain from, the language I use, be careful of my mannerisms. So just change all different aspects of my life. So that way, once Ramadan is open, it's actually setting me up to succeed for after Ramadan, post Ramadan.
So let's kind of get into what this year may look like. Obviously, there will be some challenges. So Faizan, what are you anticipating for this Ramadan, and how will it be different for you?
So I think it's a really good question, and really, even though we're talking about Ramadan before it has started, it's really just around the corner. So I have been giving this quite a bit of thought because although it's a time for spiritual introspection and growth, it's also us as parents. We have to make sure that for our children, for our community, that this is something that's like that they feel that they're a part of, and it's easy when it's easy for people that even people, if somebody doesn't practice the faith as often in the month of Ramadan, it's easy to get to feel like you're part of something, because it's almost like its own season. It's like our holiday season, and everybody that you're interacting with, they're spending a little bit more time at the mosque, or they're meeting their family members, or having food together, they're going out together, they're using it as an excuse to connect with each other. And now that everybody is staying at home, and we don't know how long these stay-at-home orders are going to last, we really have to think about, okay, how can I connect with my congregation, my community, my peers during this time of Ramadan? And so there's a lot of different things that I've been thinking about. Usually I'll decorate like inside of my house, but I really haven't done a lot outside decorations in the past few years. So I'm thinking this year, this will be a good chance for me to do that, because it'll kind of show my my attachment to this month and how I'm celebrating it. And it might kind of spark some conversation with my neighbors as well. They might say, oh, are you having like another kid or something? Like, this is, you've gone all out, like what's happening over here? And so I'm thinking about maybe doing something like that. I think that a virtual connection with our mosque and with our community is going to be huge this year as well. And so a lot of people who attend Friday prayers are now listening to like Friday talks virtually. So I think that's going to be a big part going forward. There is something that happens in the month of Ramadan, which is it's obligatory for at least some people in each community to do, and that is that they stay in the mosque, like locked into the mosque basically for the last 10 nights. It's called i'tikaf. And so I'm curious to see how that's going to take place, whether they're going to have like one person or two people socially distanced doing that in the mosque, or they're gonna not do it this year because of laws, because we have to abide by local laws as well. And so we're not going to go out of our way to put people in harm or to break laws to fulfill this obligation, because the religion allows for that concession to be made. And so I'm interested to see how they're going to kind of navigate that area. I've been trying to take lessons from how people are celebrating, how people celebrated like Easter, for example, during this lockdown. And so I've been trying to look and see what are they doing. And some of the things that I saw were trying to just make sure you have kind of like, I'm going to try to have Eid related activities for my children more so than I would in previous years. And so it's kind of like a lot of that responsibility is going to fall on me. So I've got some books that I'm going to read with them. I've got some videos ready. Amazon Prime has this video called A Day in the Haram, which is like a documentary about being in Mecca. And so I've been saving that to maybe play and watch with them, along with some Pixar movies. I don't know how I'm going to make them related to Eid, but we'll do our best. So I think just kind of creating that environment and having that virtual connection, I think is going to be huge this year.
Before we go on, can you share more about what is itikaf? Sure.
I'tikaf is basically it's when it literally means for somebody to kind of isolate, and it's when a group of people spend the last 10 nights, like how the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, would do it. Is he would spend the last 10 days in the mosque. He would be cut off, and that's one of the meanings of i'tikaf, is to be detached, be cut off from spending time with his family, his friends. Nowadays, like in past years when I haven't done the full 10 days, but I'll go for like a day or 2 days, I'll still be connected with people because I'll have my phone and I'll try to put it away or something. But it's really a time for Ramadan as a whole is a time for us to connect with our Creator. And fasting is kind of a unique act of worship because it's one of the few acts that is very hard to show off with fasting. It's like a secret between me and God. Like if I'm praying, for example, if I'm reading Quran, I can read it out loud if I want to do it for like arrogant reasons or something like that. But fasting is something that if you're truly fasting, it's between just you and your Creator. Nobody else knows that you're not eating. I mean, yeah, you can let people know, but if you're truly doing it in the spirit of what it is, it's something that is just so personal, and it's an opportunity to have that connection. And so I think the last 10 nights of i'tikaf are similar in that you're taking that to the next level where you're physically isolating yourself from everybody. Like even if somebody needs me, I'm totally unavailable to them these 10 days. And so a small group of the community usually does participate in that in the last 10 nights.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fran?
Yeah, for me, like something that I've done is really the virtual part. Faizan kind of mentioned that, but is to really build your community online. So like I said, I'm connecting with my Muslim friends back home. And so every night we're going to, read Quran together. And just, we have this thing called halaqah, which is almost like a Quran study. where we're each going to kind of give like a mini talk on a certain subject. And just for me, that is a way that I can still be able to, I guess, build community virtually. And then, Faison really pointed out something that, I didn't even think about, like putting up decorations and being able to be proud of that Ramadan is happening, doing that things. And so and additionally, just volunteering virtually from the local mosque that I have, either youth programs or volunteering to do something more than what I'm doing right now. But for me, it's really about the introspection. So I think with Ramadan, we focus so much in being in community. And so I think this is a really good time now that you're kind of on your own, and to use that time to really build those same kind of practices and habits that you build around your community members in Ramadan, is to see if you can still do that by yourself at home. I think that's something that I'm hoping to do, and keep myself accountable. So it's Tarawih prayers, I can do that myself. So hoping to keep that going as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think with just everything with COVID-19 and the stay-at-home situation, it's so all over the place, and we're still trying to figure it out. And as I was thinking about my different Ramadans and how I've spent them, one Ramadan I spent alone when I got my first job after grad school, and I had moved to the new town that I got my job in, and my husband was still finishing up his last semester, and I was like, I can't believe I'm spending Ramadan by myself. And it was this really, really sad, honestly, because usually it's even if it's a small family, it was just me and my brother, my parents, 4 people, coming together for that meal, it was every day, that's just given. And to be just by myself, it was very shocking. And I think because I was younger, I didn't use it to the max of hey, I can use this time for self-development and zone in. I think that's hard, right? So when you say these things, it's ideal, but once you're actually by yourself, you're just what do I do? And you're not motivated. And I think we might all be feeling that in work and all these things where we're just yeah, I thought I was gonna do all this professional development, but here I am just on Facebook again. So it was very hard for me. But this Ramadan, I think, will be different in another way, where now I don't have the time for Facebook because my kids are crawling on me all the time. So I'm looking forward to actually, the Tarawih prayers that I have mentioned, these nightly prayers, where last year I couldn't really take a 1-year-old to the mosque because that was their bedtime, and it was just not working. So this year, because we are at home, my husband and his brother both have been leaders in leading the prayers at different mosques, and so I get my own personal prayer situation here. My kids, I'm setting them up with special sleeping bags where they can knock out while we're praying. That's the plan. We'll see if that works. But things like that, where I'm thinking that there'll be different practices that I can actually participate in this year. But also, when you're at home and you're fasting, it's harder to keep yourself occupied. So I feel I'm probably gonna get hungrier because the kitchen's right there and it's easy access and you just see it all the time versus being in my office. So different struggles. But either way, the situation is hard, right? We're used to seeing people, we're used to going out, just sharing even meals, dropping things off to neighbors and stuff like that. May just not happen. But all of us are kind of in different spots as well, as we kind of shared. So moving away from us and kind of thinking about some students who may still be on campus, or other people that you may know that who are Muslim, and how it can be different for them and very isolating. So one of the first things I would start with is just recognition, acknowledgement of Ramadan beginning is so important. So I personally work with a lot of students, and so a lot of our students are still in the college town, right? They're finishing off their classes because their apartment lease, still goes till June or whatever. So they decide to stay on campus, and a lot of them may not have roommates, or roommates who are not Muslim, so they may be the only person in their vicinity who is fasting. So how can we support that? And it's hard when we're not able to throw an event, or hey, we're hosting the iftar, the meal to break fast together, and having the students come out. How can we still do it in a way that's letting them be seen, right? So simple things of just even like if you use social media for your office or department, can you make a shout out there? If you work with a Muslim Student Association, how can you check in there? So we can get into a little bit more of that. I'll just quickly address the Martha's question of what do Ramadan decorations look like? They look cute. For me, I think it's an evolving market. So I follow a lot of Muslim moms on Instagram, and I'm very overwhelmed this year, right? Like there's just so much out there with Muslim women, like kind of really taking a lead on this of being entrepreneurs of like, hey, maybe Party City doesn't have it, but actually they do this year, but they had to close, I think. So you can order it online. But also, a lot of Muslim women have started their own Etsy shops. You can look up a lot of Ramadan decorations. There's a lot of moon and star related things because we have a lunar calendar, and like it's a tradition to look for the moon to see if it is the 29th or 30th day of the month, so which will signify the next month starting. So a lot of moons, a lot of stars. There's a lot of debate on whether we should have a Ramadan tree. So a lot of people are like, yeah, that's so cute. We'll have a palm tree instead of like a traditional Christmas tree. But then some people are like, nah, that's trying too hard. It's a lot of things out there. That's a whole nother thing. But most of the decorations are like, just cute crafts. Maybe I can share some when I put the recording out of what we're doing in our house. But going into what are some accommodations or ways people can support Muslims during this time? Farhan, if you want to share anything.
Yeah, so the very first thing, especially right now in academia, is like exams and exam scheduling. So working with the professor or their professors to make sure that they're accommodating their schedule. I think it's even more important now that we've moved everything online. So accommodating them that maybe they necessarily can't take students can't take their exams while they're fasting. Maybe they do post fasting. So just making sure that that is a way that you can accommodate students. One, acknowledging that because we're in COVID-19, that the isolation that students are facing right now can make people homesick and miss their families. And so, especially the students that are online there or that are on campus right now. I think another way to support students is one, to acknowledge what the students are believing in. So like understanding what Islam is, like even going, like for me personally, I think as a student currently, is that even if you having the basic knowledge of Islam goes a long way for me as an individual. And then I think it's important to understand that students come from different backgrounds, different identities. And so knowing that one solution does not fit all. And so that someone that is Black and is Muslim that's living in the South is completely different than someone that is living in the Pacific Northwest. So I think acknowledging that goes a long way. Things that Oregon State has been doing to really accommodate students is that their dining hall has a separate section just for halal options for students. Additionally, accommodated their hours for Ramadan. So that way the dining halls will be open for an hour after the fast is over. And I know I'm currently working with dining to, when Eid happens, to have kind of meals with, messaging saying that we support the students, and currently working with students, having virtual hours where students can kind of drop in with the center that a lot of students come from countries that are Muslim countries. And so working with having virtual drop-in hours for those students. So those are the ways that you can, very basically show support and communicate to them. And then just having like a frequently asked questions list is important for students and resources that are on campus. And then the resources that Maria will send out afterwards, I think will be really vital that that you can use to help students and accommodate.
Faizan, anything that you should share?
Yeah, I think Farhan touched on a lot of the big points, and I totally agree with everything that he mentioned. Some things that maybe supplementary to that. So aside from the direct outreach, which is the most beneficial and has been probably the biggest impact, some of the things that I've been trying to do, working with my mosque and other local organizations, is to try to see if we can include some information about the month of Ramadan in local like newsletters or e-magazines that go out, working either with local library or different organizations. There's an article that I'm working on, which is appealing, asking people to actually try out a date, because a lot of people that are not Muslim have not had dates before. And as Muslims, we have it a lot in the month of Ramadan. They're available for sale like everywhere. So I'm working on like this article, have a date night like inside, but it's a date, like you're eating a date, not you're going on date night. So I'm working on something like that. And we're gonna try to make that article and resource available so that other organizations can use it as like a fun, nice way to introduce people to the month of Ramadan, give them some information, some exposure about it. But then also, along with that, I've been using this opportunity, of staying at home to kind of connect with some of my relatives that are in other countries. And so we started like a WhatsApp group, and I've asked them to give me recipes of things that they're going to make in the month of Ramadan. And so I'm thinking about maybe sharing some of those recipes just with the general community, just to kind of create that unity and create that togetherness. I think that for me, from a work perspective, because my whole day is shifted, it starts like way earlier than it normally does. My manager has been accommodating, and then instead of working from like 9 to 5, I'll be working from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Because a lot of meetings happen, a lot of things happen, and if you're talking all day and you're not allowed to drink water, like it gets really difficult. So the sooner your responsibilities for the workday can end, the better from that perspective. So I'm trying to just, because a lot of times I'll wake up really early in the morning, I'll drink a bunch of water, and then I'll fall asleep. And then when I wake up, I'm starting right at level 0 again. Like I'm super thirsty. So I'm going to try to just stay awake from that time where I'm waking up in the morning, and then just carry on until 3, and then maybe take a nap after that. And then I'll wake up. Next thing I know, I'm almost time to break fast. So I'm adjusting my schedule, and I'm trying to see if I can align that with everything else. So just my company being accommodating towards that. Our company also has a monthly newsletter that we send out. So I'm going to include that recipe and that's some stuff about Ramadan in that monthly newsletter. It goes to all staff and faculty at our school, but it doesn't go to the students. But I think it's a good way to kind of reach out and just create that bridge. And so there will be people that will hear about the month of Ramadan, and when they see like this type of exposure, this introduction to it, they can reach out to you more about further questions. And those are the kind of bridges that we're trying to build. The last thing that I can think of is our mosque is also trying to create like graphics and just kind of like memes and kind of some fun, nice things that they can share with the different relationships that they have. We have really good relationship with like local law enforcement, where we want to show our appreciation to healthcare workers that are on the front line. So we're thinking about making Eid gift baskets to give to them and kind of create that bridge and start that relationship. One thing that I'm also trying to focus on is to support small businesses that are really hurting in our areas, and kind of use that as an opportunity to kind of create a relationship with them as well. And that includes small Muslim businesses, small businesses in general. And so those are just some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah, there's I think there's so many cool ideas that are coming about, and people being creative with doing all these things because we have to be virtual or just offering in different ways. And I'm excited to see what happens this year with the new things that will be started. I think even when you were mentioning some of the things, one thing that kind of came to mind is I remember, I think maybe Best Buy a couple of years ago, like included Eid or Ramadan in their like marketing material and like wishing people, you know, a blessed time. And that actually got a lot of like some backfire from a lot of people who are like, why are we recognizing and celebrating this? So just something to think about too, you know, sometimes I'm sure everybody who's on this call right now, your intentions are like, yes, let me do what I can. But we're sometimes in this bubble where we kind of assume like everybody's going to be supporting, but there's still a lot of pushback from, you know, any of these places that we're trying to, you know, that also belong to us as community members, right? And libraries, I think, are one of those places where a lot of learning happens, but there is still pushback sometimes from the community where it's like, no, why are they here? That othering is still here. And I think sometimes we forget that, especially when we're in education, where we are trying to like cultivate this space that everybody can be included in. So some things that kind of came to my mind too. This semester, I was working with the Muslim Student Association on our campus to have different, so Ramadan will be starting about next week, like Thursday or Friday. And so it would be like about 10 days left in the semester that maybe, in during Ramadan. So we were thinking about how can we help the students come together all those days while they're still on campus before they may go home after the semester ends. And we were getting like, housing to sponsor one of the dinners or the iftars, the Multicultural Student Center where we work, we were going to do one. Housing was going to do like really a day for like the different areas. International student services, because a lot of Muslim students are international, and a lot of them are also domestic. So how do we build that bridge as well? So there was a lot of different things we were going to do, and obviously none of that's happening now. But it's something to think about in the future too, because next year Ramadan will be even earlier into the school year, right? So it will be 10 days, about 10 days earlier than it is this year, and that's how it keeps going up. So thinking about graduation ceremonies next year, how can we still do that and accommodate for the timing of the fast? Is there a school that maybe can host a reception at sunset, so that can be like a fast breaking time for Muslim students and their families to join as well. So a lot of different things, and I think this time can also give us the opportunity to think about those things before having to scramble at the last minute next year. But one of the biggest things I think is having that relationship with your MSA or your Muslim community wherever you live, whether that's maybe through your child's PTA, or you're part of the Chamber of Commerce. There's so many things that we're all involved in, and all of us are living in these places, right? So how can we or you as allies, take that step of, hey, are we doing any kind of recognition, or do we even know this is happening, right? Even that little tidbit in a newsletter that goes out to whoever, it makes a huge impact. And I see that just when I'm working with, being with my kids, like, you may have seen an uptick in Muslim representation, visible Muslim representation in different commercials. So a lot of Nike, a lot of these brands have a lot of Muslims kind of representing in their commercials. Yes, it's capitalism and they're trying to sell to us. I understand that. But when I see my daughter kind of seeing another person who's wearing a scarf in a Target commercial, she's like, wow, cool, I love Target more now. So it does have a huge impact in that representation. And so how do you, have that in your different circles and spheres? So coming back to the students, how is your relationship with the MSA, and kind of how Faizan said, like, it's a New Year resolution type of thing. So like maybe you or your office doesn't have a relationship with the Muslim students on campus, and you don't want to randomly, awkwardly be like, hi, how are you? But you Ramadan is that time where you can have that check-in. Hey, I just learned that it's Ramadan, or Ramadan is coming up. How can we support you or be there for you? So this is a great time to build that relationship. And another plug too, like if the MSA doesn't really know what they can be doing at this time virtually, you can connect with us and we can give you some ideas. I know some of our campuses are helping their MSAs connect with some of the speakers that we represent through Book of Muslim, and just having like a virtual meal with them, some of their speakers that they may look up to from Instagram, or like the work that they've done in social justice spheres. And they're just like planning, hey, our MSA is gonna log on to Zoom and that speaker is gonna be here too. And we're all gonna, eat this meal virtually together. So that's been kind of a cute idea that we've seen around. So there is a lot of things that we can do, and a lot of things that we'll be trying out. And I think it'll be exciting to kind of see where this goes. But I'm going to open it up to Q&A. And as Farhan and Faizan, as you think of things too, feel free to jump in. But we do have one question. Any recommendations for online programming around Ramadan, specifically for international student populations at universities? Anything that comes to mind to either of you?
Yeah, something that we're trying to do here is to do it around food, since international students come from different countries, trying to create like a hashtag that's kind of like a representation of their culture and their food. And so that they can share with the rest of the community that's at Oregon State. So create a dish at your home and then share it via online, just to show how proud you are, or your meals, just to build community. It's kind of like a simple thing that you can do, especially around food. something that, that I myself will also participate in. That's like one thing you can do that's really small and easy to do.
Another item along with that is maybe try to fast a day in solidarity and in kind of feeling what it's like to be a Muslim, like fasting for like half a day or fasting for something, and trying to have like an online reflection panel about that. I know that there's one youth group that's working on that with a local church, and they're just they already have a really good relationship, and so they're trying to try fasting for a day, but it's like without water as well, like the kind of the way the Muslims fast, and just have a reflection at the end of the day, like how do we feel, what kind of things. Some of the things that I've been talking to them about is how right now we're already in a situation where the world has kind of already tested us in a way where we have learned a lot about ourselves through this pandemic. I think a lot of people have learned that they can make do with a lot less materialistic things than they were previously, maybe they thought. And so I think fasting is kind of a wake-up call like that as well, where you go through a day like that and you realize that, oh, I don't actually have this, I don't need this attachment to like food or to this, or you have more self-discipline. One of the things the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, told us is that fasting builds restraint, it builds discipline. And so for me, one of the things that I always like to share in those reflection panels is just like the benefits of fasting. It could be physical from health perspective, but also like from like the spiritual diseases of the heart, like laziness and hastiness and arrogance, and kind of just having that. So maybe just like a reflection program, and it doesn't have to even be if other people don't want to fast, but like maybe Muslims like sharing their experience in fasting so far, like a midpoint check-in 15 days into Ramadan, like how's it going, and they can just share kind of their thoughts and things like that.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think like one of the hot words, and I know Farhan, your like PhD is related to this somehow, in like mindfulness, or your so I think that's the essence, right? You're more mindful of what you consume, how often you consume, and all of that, right? Things that we don't really notice, and that's like the intention of what are we doing every day? How much time am I wasting, or how much food am I eating? How many times have I been rude to somebody? So a lot of that kind of comes into play. All right, so the question here I have some Muslim students in my online classes, and I'd really like to send an announcement to my class to acknowledge Ramadan, to show support. Do you have any recommendations on how to go about that?
Yeah, there are a couple of ways to do that. A lot of times universities will send out like an email, just showing that Ramadan is happening to accommodate that. You can use that same language that a university does. You can reach out to different offices, like Office of Diversity and Inclusion. You can reach out to offices of Multicultural Student Services to work with them directly to figure out what that language is and making sure it's inclusive. And I know that you can also work with the local Muslim Student Association and craft a message around showing solidarity. That could be a way. So there are just different ways. I know there's also I can also send you, if you're wanting kind of the language that we use here at Oregon State and what we've used in my previous institution. So there are different ways to do that.
Yeah, and when we send the recording out, we'll send some graphics and language that can be in your newsletter or email. Also, like something that can have default on your syllabus always too, is this just how you may have an accommodation for any disabilities or learning abilities. And similarly, if you have a religious holiday or practice coming up, that you can inform the faculty beforehand. Putting that in your syllabus allows us to know that, okay, you may be aware of this, versus feeling that like, oh, I'm only that one student who's coming to ask for accommodations. So being proactive in that is always helpful as well. Yeah, and we'll send some graphics. We also will send some memes. So like whatever your tone is, if your class knows you, that if I think that would be appreciated as well.
Yeah, a common post that sometimes people will make. I know when I was a student, if my instructor didn't post this, but if he posted something like "Welcome Ramadan, have a happy Ramadan, have a blessed Ramadan," just even acknowledging it, just like how you're doing, I think that's absolutely amazing, and that would it gives students like motivation and a push that and Muslim students that they're gonna feel awesome about that. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Any other questions? A couple minutes. Yeah, even to the international point, like, you know, a lot of students who may have planned to go back home and are just not able to, it could be a very, very different Ramadan for them. And even like how it's hard to, you're not going to be able to go to the local mosque even. So just letting them know, like, hey, if you can be that facilitator of something for them virtually, like letting them know that you're there or that you know some resources, I think that's helpful, because a lot of times students are not having that time to think about what they can be doing. Even when I've reached out to our university's MSA, they're like, you know, I'm taking the MCAT, I'm trying to figure out if I can even like get, you know, what's going to happen next semester, since like my study abroad, all these things that our students are worried about. The more that we can let them know that, hey, I may know something or can help connect you with some resource, the more helpful that will be. So, all right. So if we don't have any more questions, do you have any closing thoughts, Faizan and Farhan?
I think the only thing is just, I think this is like a great first step to kind of really supporting your students, your neighbors, your community, to really support Muslims. So I just encourage you to keep on trying to educate yourselves on kind of the Islam, on your Muslim students. I think that's one of the best ways, is just to really inform yourselves of kind of do's and don'ts. And that goes a long way with your Muslim neighbors, your Muslim students, your Muslim communities.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful that Book of Muslim put this together like they did last year. I think it's really beneficial, and especially to all the attendees that are here, because it's not an easy thing. Even though we're all at home, it's not easy to take out time for these types of things and being proactive and being. I mean, this is huge. One of the things that I'm trying to not do this Ramadan is to gain weight. As Fran was mentioning, how people do end up gaining weight. And so I already would stay at home. It's already difficult. And then Ramadan is already more difficult, because a lot of times we cook like the best foods in the month of Ramadan. And so I've been passing around this meme. Do my 600-pound life people, do they just know where you are after Ramadan, or do you have to contact them? So that's kind of the thing that I've been sharing around. So I'm just really appreciative that everybody was here and we could share some of these resources, some of these experiences. The last thing that for me is, during the month of Ramadan, good deeds are multiplied. We believe that they're multiplied 70 times to like 700 times more. And so I want to make sure I use that time to its max. And so just want to call that out as well, because I think that there's so much to balance between spiritual good deeds and then also like the outward things of reaching out and helping our children, helping our community members. It's just such a tough balance. So I think maybe recognizing that balance and giving people the opportunity for what they need that time for, I think is huge. I think there's another question on there.
Yep. For university, how should we go about reaching out if we don't have a Muslim Student Association? And I know we kind of take this for granted sometimes, that you know, every campus is going to have an MSA, but that's not true, especially on smaller campuses. I think the best thing that you can do is like anything that goes out from your president, chancellor, vice chancellor, just include that in there, because there may be a Muslim student on campus who's not in an organized fashion, but they're there, right? So they see that. Or if you had the capability of hosting maybe like an interfaith way to explore that, right? So like Faizan mentioned, Easter just happened. There may be different holidays that people may be celebrating differently right now with COVID. So can everybody who may be doing these different practices come together in a virtual way to kind of share their experiences or thoughts or concerns? So interfaith is a lot of times a way to go if you don't have a specific MSA or specific religious student organization. So that's one way to kind of start that dialogue and discussion.
I would also say work with your departments on campus in terms like multicultural student services, diversity inclusion offices. I know a lot of the places, at least the previous institution I worked at, had like a frequently asked questions list, and had messaging that if there were Muslim students or any other faiths, that they can reach out to them directly. And that was a messaging that they broadcasted a lot. So that can be something where at least put it out there, like Maria said. And then hopefully you can get to one student, two students that kind of connect you to the rest of the community.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. We're at time. So just some of the last little tidbits that I wanted to say real quick. This is a record session, so we'll be sending this out. So if you need to watch it, hear something again, or share with your campus, feel free to do that. one thing that we are doing at Book a Muslim is hosting a virtual Muslim student graduation. So since most campuses, if not all, are not having a in-person commencement, we're trying to do something virtually for Muslim students all over the country. So I will send that link out. Really, it'll just be like an hour thing online. We have a commencement speaker, Dalia Mugahed, who is a researcher in Islamic and Muslim relationships in the country and doing really cool stuff. And I'm sure Muslim students, if they hear that name, will be pretty excited to hear from her. And then we'll also do a reading of names, like a typical graduation. So if you do work with Muslim students, or if you can put that out there in any way, we'd love to have you promote that. We'll also send some more resources, as mentioned, that you can read up more or just follow on social media. I think that's one thing to kind of continue the learning is like, if you're already scrolling on Facebook or Instagram, what are some pages that you can like so that you can kind of see, okay, it is Ramadan, or, you know, what's happening in the Muslim community so that you can be aware. We also sent some graphics you can use for your campus social media to wish people a happy Ramadan. And if there's any other questions that come up, we'll answer those. And the two last requests, if you don't already follow Book a Muslim on Instagram or Facebook, please do so. Your support is so valuable to us. And lastly, if you choose to do so to support us in a different way, we are on Patreon, where you can become a joiner, the Book a Muslim Bam Bam, for just $3 a month. And I'll put that link in the email too, just to support the work that we're trying to do by providing, you know, representation in your campus activity programming, multicultural calendar, anything like that. So that's all from me. I'll send that all in an email. And I hope to continue working with you. So thank you, Faizan and Farhan, for all the things that you've told us today. And thank you to all the participants who joined us.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Thank you so much.